thought there would be two people, but apparently there's more. So, hi everybody. My name is Nalini Chhetri. I think you're the new person. So maybe this is all directed towards you. So I've been here at ASU since 2005, and but I have a little bit of an eclectic background because I'm both a natural and a social scientist. My background has been in genetics until my undergrad, my master's, and a lot of my fieldwork was, I did a lot of cytogenetics, so it was very lab-based. And then decided to go in international development, worked with nonprofits for about 12 years. And then I thought, boy, this is all about society. When I go back and do my higher, doctoral studies, I'm going to understand policy. So went to Penn State and did my degree in education policy and comparative and international policy, and also got on the way a minor in demography. So I got a little, so it's all of that. Having come to ASU, I started with CISPO in 2005 as a postdoc working on climate. So I'd NSF grant and things like that. So in the past several years, I've been working primarily on climate impact and climate communication. I've also been working around international development, but I've also been working, currently I'm working on knowledge co-production with Native American groups. So I wanted to show you a snapshot of the stuff that I've been working on the past 3 or 4 years, and one slide towards the end on big data, because I've been working on both quantitative methods, qualitative methods, mixed methods, working alone, working in teams, working through funded projects, working through just my own money, okay? Just to give you a snapshot. And I think is this the interest on what are the methods the faculty have been using and how they've done? I mean, the focus is primarily that. So that's what I thought. So here we go. I just thought I'll show you, like I said, some big data, the work that I've worked on when I was a consultant for UNESCO. So that's towards the end of mixed methods and qualitative methods. And the most important thing I think students have a hard time doing is how to do the analysis when they get the data. And like, okay, what do I do with all this data and how do I make and everybody focuses on data gathering. Not much is focused on how you do the analysis of that. And I think that is, I call it the Achilles heel because it is. And we haven't done a good job of figuring that one, and I thought I'd touch upon that a little bit. Sounds like a good,
sounds great.
Okay, all right. So let's start with, and I'll also tell you the politics behind this too, right? So it might take us a long time. So this is a CDC-funded grant that I had for 3 years, building resilience against climate effect in Arizona. This was CDC-funded. The CDC is the Center for Disease Control, and so we worked with the Arizona Department of Health Services. This was in 16 states and 2 cities. And so the idea was, okay, what is it that we have to build resilience about? And for Arizona, CDC identified 4 climate effects. Extreme heat. What else do you think? What would be the other 3?
Drought.
Water, something? No.
Flooding.
Water, we are really good managers of water. It's not, so there's nothing to worry so much about, right? I mean, if we're drought, so what? We can manage water. So it's flooding. Why would flooding be a problem?
Because we're not used to rain, so there's a lot of runoff when it comes.
Yeah, but what would be the impact? So it's nothing about people, right? But why would it cause government concern for flooding?
If it's not the people?
Yeah, if it's not. Well, if people, what would it do to people?
Displace them. Property values.
So there's
infrastructure problems.
Thank you. So we do a really good job. So there's not much death, not much injury. We have good warning systems in place. What is problematic in flash flooding is infrastructure damage, because that can run into billions of dollars. Mm-hmm. So that's what we think when we think about climate impacts. That we think about. What's the third one? I said 4, right? Heat, flooding.
Really, why does the CDC care about the cost of infrastructure?
Why does it? So it damages transportation, damages hospitals, damages clinics, damages all of these. It does have impact on health,
or like
public
the
health.
library.
Yeah.
The library downtown that got destroyed.
Yes, and things like that, because especially in the remote areas, more rural areas, it is. So there are not
It was his
no
fault,
direct
but-
things. What's the third thing? Come on, guys. This is how I do things. What's the third thing? In the desert area.
Health impacts.
Yeah, so what? Which one?
Air quality?
Air quality. Why is that a big deal in Arizona?
So bad.
It's because we are a retirement community, we have elderly population, we have the more vulnerable population in Arizona, right? We have children, elderly, and we also are a manufacturing and a building economy, so most of our workers are outdoors, right? And then the fourth one is,
I already forgot the first two.
wildfires.
Oh, of course.
Of course, right? So just so you know, so what we were asked to do was we were asked to do a comprehensive literature review. So this was CDC was not, and so they said, okay, what is the literature saying about the Southwest? Can you find that out for us? That's what we did. And so there was a team, and I was the principal investigator on this. So there were a team of people that asked us to work on this, right? So the analysis of current meteorological data. So I got hold of the state climatologist to look at all of the climate stations out there, and and there is a office called the Arizona Climate Office. So, and Nancy and I worked together very closely, and then we did some climate modeling. We used the IPCC models to do that, and then GIS mapping, and then we were asked to deliver a technical report. Can I tell you about the controversy? All right, so here we go. So, and what we also produced is a policy report that was more accessible. Okay, so this is what we produced. Just wanted to give you that we actually did something, so you believe me. All right. So this is a technical report. The problem here was we mentioned this was a CDC, and it was for all 22 states. We all have to write the title of the report as Climate and Health. Okay. The Arizona Department of Health Services had a conservative Republican head, and he blew a fit, and he says, you're not going to put the word climate on the document. We said, what? This is a CDC climate and health funded project. What are you talking about? Long story short, so they refused to put this a technical report that had been validated by 7 other faculty members around campus, and run through it went through this internal review process. And they basically said you can't use the word global warming, you can't use the word climate, you can't use the word, so they gave us 7 lists. And so I said, can you put that down in writing for me? So they told me to come over to their office and said, Nalini, we can't talk to you about this over the phone, and we can't put that in writing. So the PIO, which is the Public Information Officer, and I had a conversation. So I called a witness, okay? And so there were 2 of us from ASU. We went down there, and they basically said, no, we can't do that. So Bridget Dufour, who's also there, says, no way, Nalini, this is not going on. So we said, okay, what if so this is the technical report. What if we come up, so this is what it looks like. So I'm going back on, so we did a little bit of modeling to show 2010 scenario, 2030, 2060, right? So looking at the maximum temperature using the RCP. Are you guys familiar with these terms, RCPs? All right. So what would the maximum temperature look like in the summer during July, right? So the projection, very conservative projection using, and I'll talk about RCP later on, is that the western part of the state of Arizona would become hotter and hotter. And that's mostly in the rural areas. Okay, so this is what we did. So we were also, and this is important so that we could send it out to county managers that they would get information in place so that they could have a strategy in place to do this kind of thing. So this is what we did, and that's a CDC framework that we had to use. So the CDC allowed us to do that, and that was mandated by the federal government. So because they didn't allow us, and we went back and forth, we finally said we will put the word climate in the document as long as we bookend it with another phrase called extreme weather. So that was the compromise, that now the climate would not be the first word that appeared. So extreme weather, no other document around the state has that. And if you look at, and the other way I did it was to make sure that this was easily readable at 6th grade level. So the language. We also knew that the policymakers still would not read the darn document even though it was 7 pages long. So we made out pop-outs. Can you see that? So the findings for all of this were, repeated as pop-outs. So that's how we kind of did this. And ultimately I reported this back to, at that time I was working with sustainability with Gary Dirks, the deans, up to the provost, to say that I had been muzzled about writing these words. So they said, I will back you up. So this got delayed for 6 months because of this pushback that we were having. So everybody sympathized with me, but nobody could do anything. We had to get the report out, and this was our compromise because we wanted the county managers to know what our findings were. So this was the politics. It was not just simply doing the research. That was under our control. Getting the information out was not under our control, and we had to put it on their website, and they were not willing to do it. And so that's why we had an additional set of work to do, and we set that out. So just so you know.
What is the difference between the name of these two reports?
So this one is a profile report. Can you see that?
Yeah.
Profile report.
Yes.
And we made it orangey so that we will talk about the heat, just to get that, right? And then we made this blue, it's a synthesis report. Do you see that?
That is
So
the same
we
background.
synthesized it. We synthesized the whole thing. And CDC only requires this one. So what I'm trying to say here, it's not just the research gathering and the data gathering that's important, it's also the dissemination. Because of the climate, it has so much controversy, and they all said this is too technical, it's supposed to be a technical report. That's what the CDC wanted, that was the funding about. So we did this. So this was so much politics involved. We had to make it pretty, we had to make sure that this was it. And so the public information officer went through every single line. So it went through 10 iterations, even this document, before she said it was okay. So you can go to Arizona Department of Health Services, Google this, and it'll come up. It's embedded though. So the other work that so most of this is where I'm PI on. So I've been working with NOAA. Do you know what NOAA is? Yeah. So I've been working with NOAA and to see if because I like to figure out how climate information is disseminated to policymakers, emergency managers on extreme climate events. So we got this about a very small grant, $100K. And so basically this was about informing emergency and risk management knowledge around arid region. And again, here NOAA was interested in our framework rather than our methodology about how we wanted to gather information. And they were very intrigued by our partners, Department of Emergency and Military Affairs. And so they gave us this grant. We basically did some work, and we did lots of workshops on this. So the other one that we did recently, so this one actually, I'm still wrapping this up. We got another funding on this, and here again the idea was, how do you pass information to managers? We interviewed 40 people from across the state, county managers. So we did in-depth interviews with all of them, and we used this framework as a protocol for analysis. And so I'll come back to that later on about how we did that. And so we had these standard questions in which we could make comparison. And then we found out, for example, that for Coconino County and Maricopa County, which is the larger county, versus Santa Cruz County, which is the smallest county in the state, the way people responded was vastly different. In Coconino County and in Maricopa County, there's so much going on that for emergency managers and other, they sent in the receptionist and the librarian to do some planning. Whereas in the Santa Cruz, the smaller county, everybody, they've been doing it for 40 years, so they were on top of it. So Maricopa County and Coconino County were clueless about how to do these kind of things. So the communication for them had to be at the 4th grade level. That's what they said, because the number of stakeholders that were doing this business was so vast that you could not have a technical report. Make sense to everybody? So that's why they said, when I advocated, I was talking to about 400 people on this emergency preparedness symposium, and I said, and then they said, Nalini, we have to actually bring it down to 3rd grade English. So okay. Okay, so that's how we've been writing up these reports, a very simple kind of English, not dumbing it down, but making sure it's very simple and it's very effective communication. So the other thing in terms of the climate impact, I've been doing very interesting, and I like these projects a lot around in the state and also at ASU. So at ASU, we've done in the past couple of years 3 studies that have been published recently. One is on urban forestry and cool roofs. I'll talk about that a little bit. And then impact of shade on outside thermal comfort, and then impact of solar parasol shading. So have you seen this power parasol around campus? Mm-hmm. So what we've done on this is that we have installed 18 sensors inside these solar shields, and we've put them under the solar power parasol outside under the tree to figure out whether how effective the shading are. All right, it's been. Then we also did a car. So we put these different. We got different 6 sets of cars from Earnhardt automobile dealers, and we put them under the lot 59 under the power parasol and outside in the sun to figure out what the difference inside the car would be given the different sides of the car, both under the shade and out of the shade. So that was a cool experiment. So ASU Lightworks funded it, Strategic Solar Energy funded it, Earnhardt Automobile Dealership funded. They gave us 6 cars for 15 days.
What is ASU Lightworks?
ASU Lightworks is unit within the Global Institute of Sustainability that is a consortium of all things energy that ASU works on.
Okay.
Yeah? So what we did was, for the urban forest, the first one, for this thing, what we did was the methodology we used was mixed. So the question here was, if we have urban forestry, will it help in heat mitigation? If we have white roof, will it help in heat mitigation in Phoenix? That was the 2 questions. So this was a NSF and a NOAA funded project out of U of A, and I was a PI on this. And so what we did was we did some microclimate modeling on both of this. And we did some scenarios, and I'm going to show you how we did that. So we built scenarios. So the idea was, if we wanted to figure out if urban forestry helped in heat mitigation, then the scenarios was 0% tree canopy. How would that impact? 4%, 10%, 13%, 17%, 21%, 25%, 30%. You can't have 100% tree canopy. You can't cover the whole city with trees. Only there has to be buildings and roads too, right? So that's the reason why it stops at 30. Okay, that's the maximum coverage you can have. So that's one scenario. Do you see that? The other one is if you just have regular roof, versus white roof, white roof, white roof. Right? That's the second layer. And then the third layer is you have what if you have a 1 degree current, a 1 degree change, rise in temperature, a 2 degree rise in temperature. That's the third layer, right? And then we have MOX is basically if you have a landscape that is mesic, oasis, and you have xeric. So if you have these different landscapes, we looked at the residentials. How would the temperature, how would the forest allow you to keep cool or not keep cool? So we use this as layers, and so this is how we create different scenarios, and then we ran a little bit of statistical analysis, and we found out that cool roof, and the city mayor gave us a hard time for this, that the forest, urban forest, allows you to mitigate heat. Cool roof does not. Cool roof may allow you to reduce your energy consumption, but it does not necessarily cool the building. Right? So in fact, there was an unintended consequences was the glare from the white cool roof was actually harmful to the pilots coming down to land. That was the unintended consequences of these. So the mayor had actually asked for 60,000 square foot of all municipal buildings to be painted white. So he was not happy with our result. And he asked Gary Dirks and others to pull it up. Politics I've been involved in, just so you know. Okay? So this one was the car heat. So we took everything, 2 sets of cars, same color, same size, same year, same everything, because that's how you do experiments, right? We put one under the shade and one outside, and we had sensors on those these are pen-shaped, very cheap ones. We put it on the wheels, on the dashboard, on the seat, and then we tried to we hired 2 students. They had to sit there all day, and every 15 minutes they took temperature, all right? And so we basically did it the hard way. Then we did the third one is we tried to figure out in front of the MU, what was the effect of these parasols on chain, and we call this thermal comfort. And here we did a lot of literature review, experiments, we did observation, and we tried to supplement that with surveys. We did it year round, 4 times a year we did it, and I think, oh my God, we interviewed 1,200 people, students. Can you see that? And that was a tough one. So this is what it looks like, as you can see. And so that's where we located our sensors. So if you walk carefully just outside a building, when you walk out of this building and you turn left, there's a tree, and if you look under the tree, there's a solar shield, and there's a sensor in there. So this is where we located our sensors. And then in the MU, we have 6. We have continuous, it takes measurements, 5 minutes, and we do this. So this is, it's actually fairly simple once you know how to use this. And then we did survey. So we did, it's a combined. So the questionnaires was structured interview, it was a quasi-experimental design. We did, time to complete the survey was 3 to 5 minutes. And then we tried to see, for example, I'll show you what it looked like. This is what the survey looked like. Just show you now, very simple ones. And we made sure that each of the question had we derived from literature. So it wasn't a question we randomly thought of. It had its grounding in literature. Okay, and that's important when students do survey, they say, I'm just going to write this down. I said, does this have grounding literature? Have other people done it? You can't just randomly pick up a question and think you can do a survey. That's not how it works. Okay, so yes, so this we got the approval, and then this is the survey sample. As you can see, it's fairly aggregated around college students. So we tried to get people in the 65 age also, so that it would be proportionate. And our N was, everybody understands what an N is, right? Is 1284. So we did it 4 times. So we get a sense of what the thermal comfort is. How comfortable are you under the shade? That's the concept of thermal comfort. And so we did statistical analysis, and that was important for me in order to going in to understand how we're going to analyze this data. So we ran some statistical analysis, but we also ran simple analysis on that. Okay. So that was that. Now this one is the work 3 years ago that I did in Nepal, and this was part of a USAID funded where I was the consultant. And the idea here was, I'm jumping very fast, so stop me if you're good with me so far, everybody?
Yes.
Yeah? So what this was to figure out people's perception of climate change. How, what evidence were they providing? How are they thinking, right? So this was, in this region, this was conducted by Netra and others, and I just had fun. Okay, so we went, there was this wonderful researcher with me from a project called LeeBird, which is one of the renowned think tanks there. And the idea was, how do you communicate with people who don't speak your language? Right? In this case, of course, it was Nepali I could speak, but the idea was, how do you communicate them and do it in a participatory idea? So my research is very participatory. And I engage with people a lot. So we spent a number of days with the community, and this was to work with the women and men to figure out how, if they knew their community. So I use what is called Pra Techniques, and we communicate back and forth with the community. And this was I love this thing. I told people, I don't have a cell phone. I don't possess a cell phone. They didn't believe me. I said, do you have cell phone? Everybody whipped out the cell phone. Do you see that? And some of them whipped out 3 cell phones. What? So this is how, this is in Novalparasi. This is a remote community, they gave us their community center. But these are the, as you can see over here, this is not, the things we describe on this chart is never text. It's images, it's schematic diagrams. So that's how you communicate, because this is not about, this is not about asking people specific questions. And it's also, this gentleman is on the chair, even though, most of us are on the floor. It's primarily because he's an elder, and so they gave him a place of respect, because I wouldn't have it otherwise, right? And so the men here are sitting around in circles. So all of those were important context to how you do this information gathering. So what we did was in another community, so I said, what evidence, so that we talked about warming, and I asked them, what evidence do you have about warming? Oh, I said, in a hilly location, this was a very poor community, this was up in the hills, and they said, we never used to have mosquito nets 10 years ago, and now we need mosquito nets because there are more mosquitoes. And so we think there's something happening there. It used to be in this hot place and down in the lowlands, now we have to have mosquito nets. And somebody's younger folks said, it used to be 1 month, now I have to put mosquito nets for 3 months. That was one, right? The other one, they said, we have this invasive species, this invasive species out of, and it's very bad. It used to be like 10 years ago only in the lowlands where it was warmer, and now it's here where it's warmer. And it's very bad because the cattle eat it and it makes their stomach bloat, and we don't like this. And so they were trying to show me evidence, and I said, what do you think it is? He said, I don't know, I think the temperature is going up because it, these things are not only just coming, but they're invading our fields. So these were what we were trying to do in terms of the data. So these were voices of the people. So there was not an analytical framework to analyze this, but these were stories that I collected, and then stories I put together that then I finished up with the report for USAID. So yeah, this was about 3 weeks of work with communities. And then I was also interested in how what was happening in the field. And so one of the things is that Nepal has one of the most successful concept around community forestry, which is people preserve their own forest, and they have their own management system and their own governance, and it's highly successful, one of the most successful cases around the world. So I asked with the community members and the elders about how that was impacting their own lives. And they said, these community forests are really good, but they're so problematic because now we have more monkeys and we have more hedgehogs. The monkeys are eating our crops, and the hedgehogs are just burrowing. So I don't really like it. So what are you doing to, mitigate that problem? So this gentleman, both of them are veterans, he said, we've come up with a solution. And the idea was that he took out his bow and he said, are you going to shoot me? And so the idea, what he did was on the string, instead of an arrow, he had modified it. Can you see that? To make sure that with twines, so that it would hold pellets. And he had baked these mud pellets. And then at 3 at a time, he could shoot at the monkeys because they can't kill the animals. They're not allowed, but they can chew it up. And he was like spry, 80 years old, barefoot, jumping, agile. Oh my God, I wish I'll be that agile when I'm that age. So, but can you see, he would just roll up the clay, let it dry, and he had an arsenal of that mud pellets in his pocket, and he used that. And the monkeys were deadly afraid of him. So yeah, so that's, I thought was really cool. So the other thing was, in the communities in the more lowlands, I take study abroad students all the time to understand how communities do technology in the developing countries. And students would look at this and, oh, that's a poor community, right? And so I said, look carefully, what else do you see there? And, oh, they have a solar panel. They have a dish satellite, right? So where's this conversation going? And so this community is not allowed to have, on the grid, their electricity, partly because they're next to a national forest, which conserves the tiger, the Bengal tiger, and the one-horned rhinoceros. So they were not only able to lay the cables to bring electricity into this. Then this also happens to be an indigenous community. So guess what? This is a story of exploitation, all of these kind of things. What they came up with was using solar panel. So they would save enough money, all of them, and would have enough, 60 watts, enough to power 2 light bulbs, 1 fan, and that would be good, right? But this was also a really cool, roofing material to keep the house cool. And this is happening during the monsoon, so the mud wears away, okay? So there's some architectural thing to this. So you can see how disgusting I look, but look at her. So, but I stopped by this house, and so this is this young lady, and so she basically was 19 at the time. She had 2 kids, and so she told me that she had saved money to buy the solar panel, and she apologized that the son was naked, because basically saying, he pees all the time, and I can't change his thing all the time, so I just let him be. It's fertilizing the ground, So she quickly tried to clean that stuff up, because she was being respectful to me as a guest, and I just happened to stop by. But this is, can you see this? Just the other side. So just by looking at this, you don't get that concept, right? I mean, this is poverty staring at you, and then just behind it, you have this satellite with all of these kind of things. So it makes you rethink and reimagine what it is that how people are managing and working on this. So these were perceptions that I wrote up, and we discussed with the students, and I made students make photo essays, write about it. So this is how to capture and tell stories in different ways. So students were stuck on the other side on the mud, and they're trying to push the car, and then some of us had fun, and she allowed me to take a photo. So towards the end. So this one, I haven't done big data in a while, but when I was at Penn State, and I was a consultant with the UNESCO, they asked me to work on, they asked me, so because I had a education policy background, they asked me to analyze the literacy environment to see if that was what would make or break on why families got an education or did not get an education, in terms of how we should look at policies. So they gave me a huge data set, and it was to look at 200 countries. So the N over there, and they gave me like all of these variables to work with: total adult literacy rate, male adult literacy rate, female, youth, percentages of primary school enrollment, people with household with TVs, household with computers, household newspaper circulation, book production, registered library users. So these were the variables they gave me in this huge data set that they had. And so what I did was for this one, I had to did simple analysis, statistical analysis, and I ran a bunch of correlations. I ran a bunch of regressions to find out that having a radio was not necessarily correlated with people going to school, but having a television was highly significant in people wanting to go to school, those kind of things. So there's a literacy environment, you'd think, right? It was just having, can you see just the radio? It's not significant at all. So, so one of the things about the big data is that it's got a lot of problems, in the sense that you had to work with variables that you could find across like at least 100 countries, and that means the number of variables reduced, because you had to have some kind of consistency, and some you couldn't find it. So this was basically some of the big data. I haven't worked with big data recently, but I just thought that to let you know that this is something that I've done in the past. And yeah, this is I was able to put it. So this was a report that was commissioned. Remember, for 10 years, UNESCO ran the Education for All. So this was what they asked us to work on. All right. So I just gave you a quick synopsis of what I've been doing in the past few years. Any questions? Any discussion? So I'm happy to, take questions and think about all of the, advice and stuff like that I can give you all in the future. But let me just go up. Yeah.
I have a question.
Yes.
You mentioned at the beginning that that students, or your experience that students have trouble then like knowing how to analyze the data they collect. Can you give us some tips as to how to analyze our data? Because I know we definitely learned about collection, but
Yeah, you don't learn
and it's
about
like, oh.
yes. So I tell my students that and this is partly our fault, right? So the whole point of a proposal defense is that you make that very clear on how it is you want to do. And I think what we don't do well in SFIS is some of us are not well trained or haven't had the experience in doing these data collection and then cleaning it because it's been relatively small, and that's why and you can easily do it. But it's like doing reference work. You think you can do it in 1 hour and it takes you 7, right? When you're writing a paper, I mean, is that your experience? A lot. So one is to get away from the assumption that you have to put in enough time, that you can do it fast. That's not going to happen. Multiply that by 5. All right. So what happens going in? The best tip I can give you is to know going in, rather than out after the fact. So you're going to say, I'm going to say you're going to interview. What are you doing, Kate, right now? Are you interviewing people?
Not currently.
But are you planning to interview people?
Yes.
How many people are you going to currently?
No idea, but let's say
10? 30?
for dissertation work,
Yeah.
probably between 20 or 30, depending on what the other activities
Say.
are.
All right, so let's do some simple math here, right? So you're going to do 20 people, right? How is it 5-minute interview, 10-minute interview?
Probably like 30 or 40 minutes.
All right, so that's 45 minutes, okay?
Yeah.
So what's that? Right, 900 minutes of interview,
Yeah.
right? So now, times that by 5, this is verbal.
Mm-hmm.
When you're going to transcribe, you have to times it by. It's going to take you 5 minutes or longer to transcribe each of those.
Yeah.
Or longer. In the beginning, it'll take you longer because it was, what the heck? And as you get used to it, it'll be faster.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, there are softwares and stuff like that, but things like that. So you have that transcribing, right? So what you do is you interview. First you have to save it somewhere. Believe me, those take time. You have to have a backup. You start to transcribe. Then you start to code. Then you start to categorize. Then you start to look for patterns. All right, this is the analysis part. This is the cleaning part.
Can you explain what you mean by patterns?
Okay, hold on. This is the collection part. Okay? When you do analysis of any data, what are you actually doing?
Looking for patterns.
Thank you. So analysis, basically, what is an analysis? To get away with it. Analysis is basically looking for patterns. Okay? What else are you doing in an analysis? Trends, very good. What else?
It's sense making.
Hold on.
Oh.
That is the conclusion. You're trying to get something out of it. What else are you doing? You're looking at trends. You're looking at patterns. What else are you looking?
Anomalies.
Thank you. Outliers and anomalies. Very good. Right? So you're looking, when you're looking, everybody knows the bell curve? More or less?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah? So what you're trying to do is, you're looking at human behavior, right? And how much is this? What percentage of is the hump? If it's one standard deviation.
95.
All right, let's just say 90 for now, right? You're trying to understand 90%, but you're also trying to look at this tail and this tail. And those are the outliers. And this is the pattern. So an analysis is basically, you're trying to make sense of your data. But you're making sense through finding a set of patterns, a trend, and also some outline. That's what basically. So, statistical tools are basically very, I think, limited. I used to teach statistical analysis a lot, and I think they're useful, but it's also very, statistics are just another analytical tool that looks at relationship, right? Correlation, regression, the trends, the likelihood, the odds. These are the language we use in statistics, right? Odds, the likelihood. These, and I'm basically talking about relationships. So ultimately what you're doing is you're looking for relationship. That's what analysis is all about. So if you go in, so you're interviewing all of these people. So what's happening is that until you categorize and code this well, we will not be able to analyze it well.
Yeah.
So one of the ways if you're interviewing people, so it all has to be guided by your right?
Mm-hmm.
You can't analyze in a vacuum. So what is your research question or questions?
Mm-hmm.
That is the anchor with which you start to find the patterns, the trends,
Mm-hmm.
the outline. So in my Nepal thing, for example, we were tasked with the ideas of what are the perceptions of people around global warming,
Mm-hmm.
and how are they adapting?
Mm-hmm.
Right, so it was an action research kind of thing. So it was a perception study. So it was grounded in the perception theory. Okay, so my thermal comfort was basically, is the power parasol, the structural shade, the same as the shade around under a tree? And our answer was yes. We found the temperature to be the same. However, the tree will take 10 years to reach that optimum height and shade, whereas a structure you can put it out. And we also found out that people have this perception under the tree it's cooler, and under the shade it's like not so cool. Onto the iron structure it's like, it's ugly, and therefore I'm not as cool.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but when we also had the sensors at the same time, right? So we asked people, what do you think the temperature is right now? And so they would say, 78. And we actually matched the timing. We also had a time on the survey, and we matched that with the digital survey on our sensors, and it would be actually 2 or 3 degrees less on the digital thing. So people's perception of how hot and cold they were varied. So the perception, so that's why the concept is very important. So so that will basically you'll say, I'm going to look for patterns. So what is your research on?
The research will be on how, like, images of the future, like visual images, communicate complex information. So there'll be a variety of components, one talking to
Communicate
complex information. So a variety of components. One will be like more experimental and
Okay.
showing images to people and asking asking perception questions.
Yes.
Discourse analysis, and then talking to professionals who actually make these images
Yes.
to understand how it's done in practice, what sort of
Yes.
information is going in and coming out.
And so a lot of those studies have gone on. So what you need to do is when you do literature review, you
Mhm.
don't look at the data collection only, you look at how people have analyzed that and see if that's the same kind of analysis will work for you. Is it a collection of images
Mhm.
and how people think about it and the relationship that they have? And are you seeing trends in how certain people think about it
Mhm.
versus other kind of people? Are there exceptions? So you try to put on all of those becomes your relation analysis. What I don't like, and I have this big thing, is I kind of think that n is equal to 2 sample in some cases is too small. I've used people do that and publish. I don't know why. I don't think you can get a trend with only 2 points in space. You agree? Right? You need at least a 3 because it could be there. Right? The third point could be there, and the third point could be there.
Mhm.
Just so you know, because if you have a too small a sample in terms of how you're doing analysis, I would rather you go out and add another person so that it's more robust.
Yeah, I don't imagine having less than
No, once you're doing
10
categories.
or 15 or
Yes, so
even
once
more.
once you have a sample of 15, you still have to categorize them. You might have
Right.
age, policymakers, certain policymakers, and you
Mhm.
might have, who are these people you're interviewing? Are they in the same group?
Mhm.
Okay, so then that
Mhm.
becomes simple. Okay, so that's hopefully answer. So what you do is in terms of, so this is, if you divide this by 60, how many hours is this is just in transcribing? Right, so even if you, I'm going to do, I'm just going to round it up to 60 here. So 6,000 minutes is basically
100 hours.
100 hours.
Nice, Becca. No?
100 hours, just
Go ahead.
just to give you a rough estimate
Right.
about how much just to do the transcript.
Yeah.
So you have to be very much, so not to waste time, is that when you're doing the transcribing,
Mhm.
I recommend that you come up with keyword phrases that you think. So some of the way to do this bibliometric analysis and other kind of thing is to come up with keyword
Mhm.
patterns and using phrases that you think will, and that you have to base that on literature, on how that you will answer your questions on future communication of complex information. So how are people using the word complex information? Are people using the word scenarios? Are people using the word projections?
Mhm.
So those become your keywords that you see. Are they appearing in your transcript?
Mm.
You color code them. Yellow means this, green means this, and you start to do that, and that's where coding comes in.
Oh, okay, so do it while you're.
And it'll save you time, because you don't, the thing is, when you're reading the same transcript 5 times, you start to blur.
Right.
So doing it fresh,
Yeah.
so do it a couple of times in the beginning, just to get a sense of it, and then do it while it's still fresh, because nobody wants to go and read the transcript like you just skim it
Right.
and then therefore you lose valuable information. So do it while it's fresh, so it doesn't have to be linear, you can make it parallel, okay? And once you code it and you start to, then when you're coding it and you say, okay, all the green color highlights go here, all the gray here, and you've categorized. When you start to categorize, your patterns will form.
That's very helpful. Thank you so much.
Okay?
I have a question.
Yes.
So you mentioned at the very beginning that your background was in genetics.
Yes, it was.
And then you have gone so many different places, and
I
you've
have.
used so many different kinds of methodologies. And so I was wondering, when you are attempting to kind of take on a new methodology, how do you prepare yourself to do it, and when do you feel comfortable enough to actually do it in research?
So climate impact asked us, that was partly guided by what our donors wanted. The CDC wanted us to do 3 big things: the literature review, right, modeling, and perception study. So because we were in a team, it was taken care of, right? So we sat together and basically said, all right, we need a modeler here. Who's the modeler? We have to get a modeler. So Ariana stepped in. So I can do some modeling work, and I've done a little bit of modeling, but I'm not an expert on that. Okay, so we would discuss things about that. And then in terms of literature review, I said I can do this. So we did. So we first identified the main important documents that the CDC wanted us to read, and then we looked at all of the. In this case, we looked at the National Climate Assessment. Do you know what that is? Oh gosh, you guys. Do you know what the IPCC? So do you know what the IPCC is?
Mhm.
Everybody? All right. So the National Climate Assessment is the US version of the IPCC. Okay, so we have the IPCC, that's international, and the National Climate Assessment, or the NCA, that is US's version of the IPCC, and it's mandated by the Congress. So the Congress passed an act in 1998. I have to check the year. Okay, that every 5 years that the Congress receives a report from all 17 federal agencies about the global change, including climate. So every 5 years. So for the second climate assessment, ASU hosted the town hall, and we led it. And this is basically an assessment of everything on water, energy, ecosystems around in the U.S. And it's very much reflective of the IPCC. Just like the IPCC is an assessment, it does not generate knowledge. IPCC can only assess. It is legally not allowed to do anything else other than that. The same thing with the National Climate Assessment for the U.S. And so the National Climate Assessment is basically assessing, doing a literature review of all published documents. And so the first step is to figure out which are the documents you want to assess. And that is key, right? So we would figure out first and foremost what are the key seminal documents you need to be as part of your dissertation or your research in our case. And so we spend considerable amount of time figuring out what those documents are. And then we ask the experts, do we have in our repository all of the documents that we need to review? And that takes time. And only once we've got it, then we categorize it, and we basically say which part of it do we need to focus on first, and what are we trying to get out of it, right? So that's the second step, and people disregard how important that is, right? And so when we write grants and we do all of these proposals, and they said, okay, this guy is missing. How come you don't have this famous person in your, and so your work is invalidated because you didn't put in the effort to figure out who the important players were. So that's what I do. And then of course, so we, as a grad student, you're building skills, and you can say, oh, I want to do GIS, I want to do some statistical thing, and you can keep on adding that to your tools. As a graying person, I basically say, okay, I don't want to do that. I did that a long time ago. I'm rusty now, right? I don't want to do that, and I did 2 minute statistical analysis. I can still do that, but now it's version 210 or something. I did 2. So the students will know this much better. So I can supervise. I know the theory behind it. I know the thinking behind it. So I make sure that you don't make big mistakes, but I can do that. So it's very much a judgment thing in terms of how it is that you analyze it. And when I'm doing it on my own, I am a proponent of mixed methodologies because I believe in the T. I think surveys have their uses, but I'm more interested in the richness and in trying to figure it out. But I don't disregard the quantitative methods because I think it shows us the right direction, and then we can start to dig in a little bit deeper. So I know a lot of my colleagues don't like it. I push back on that, and I say you can't, just because it's difficult or may take a little bit longer should not mean that you should disregard it. It has its value. And if you're not an expert on it, get somebody on board who will help you out with that. And that's how you do a team. Does that answer your question?
Yeah,
Okay.
it does.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I had a question about the method used when engaging with other communities who don't necessarily speak your language or not through words. So could you speak a little bit more about the methods you use through visuals and other
Yes,
methods?
so there is Robert Chambers, who is a well-known person. He is one of the proponents of this technique called the PRA, the Participatory Rural Appraisal. So there are different ways to do it. These are some of the techniques. There's a resource mapping, there is seasonal calendars, there are Venn diagrams, there are different techniques out there that you can use, and I've used that a lot in Africa. So I'm doing a lot of work in Ghana, in West Africa, and I don't speak the language there, right? And so what we've done with the communities is that and so I also believe that research it cannot be extractive. So the philosophy is that whatever I find, preliminary findings, I give back to the community. So I leave my, the charts and everything, I leave it behind. So I've done the same here with the Native American groups. Last semester, Netra and I were with the Pueblo community, and so we were trying to figure out how the canal system worked. And so we engaged all of the community members, and again, we did some resource mappings and seasonal calendars. So you can go on the web and you find these techniques. So we teach students how to do this and how to facilitate the process and what you do with the information. And in the resource mapping, for example, what you do is we talk with the community. You go to the different homes and you establish a relationship and establish trust, and you say, hey, chief or whatever, we're trying to do this exercise, would you come? And once you've established that relationship, there's a lot of homework that goes into it, right? And we tell them you're transparent, you're upfront about what it is that you want to do, and you say this is the research, we are students and scholars, we are working with the university in Ghana, and then tomorrow we're doing this in the afternoon, can we use your community center? So in all of the background work happens. Then we go to the community and we use the sand, we use the, whatever. Sometimes it's not just a chart, we use colored papers, beans, rocks, and we, for example, what I always do in these communities, I tell the community chief and elders, I have your permission, yes. I get an elder lady next to me, and then I get the communities sitting around and basically, can you draw the map of the village? Can you tell me where the east and west is? Can you tell me main roads, where the church is, where the road is, where the pond is, where the factory is, whether the police station is? And everybody knows their own village. They feel empowered, right? They start to circle around it, and there's a lot of noise, and then we have small post-it notes and some things like that, and say, can you tell me where your homes are? And this is where last year, 5 years ago, I was working with the engineering students from ASU, and they were doing cook stoves, and the cook stove was horrible. It was so badly designed. It was, oh my goodness, but if I told the students that it was badly designed, it was utter failure, they would be crushed. My intention was not to crush them. My intention was, guys, you have to get out of your head. There's a community out there. So we had a bunch of same engineering students we had taken with us. So, and then the engineering students had designed this cook stove with a flat base, right, for a family of 4. All right. So the first thing we did on the resource mapping, as one thing so the community had fun. And so I said, oh, this is our community, right? And this is where the sun rises. I said, okay, where's the north? I said, we don't want north. The sun rises in the east, so therefore it'll be, so they did this, right? So therefore north would be there. They started with east. Just the conception was different, right? And so the road was here, and this was the church, and that kind of stuff. And then people started to put their homes next to, this was the lake homes, right? So with the post-it notes, we gave them colored post-it notes. And then I gave them black beans and white beans. And the black beans and white beans was white. I said, white has to be female, black has to be male. You have to be humorous about it. So they put white beans and they put black beans. And we found out that as they were putting it, that each house had at least 10 to 12 members. 10 to, if not more. And the engineering student went, well, we designed it for 4 people. We designed it for 4 people. So as the visuals were happening, and then what we did was, once we did that, we did what is called another technique. It's called a transect. So you want to verify this data, right? But you don't have time to go through the whole village. So what you do is, there's a technique called a transect. So you try to find, you cut across the map to see which one you want to go, which area you want to investigate further. So you walk along the transect. It's okay. So after the mapping is done, you have fun, and you go out and you walk along this transect to see whether what they have said in the resource mapping is true or not. And so you do the transect mapping, and that's a very well-known, it's been going on for 30 years, these techniques. It's very old. And then that's when we found out, yes, in fact, when they were cooking, they were these were in curved pots because they were making fufus, you have to, really, it's not on a flat pot. So the engineers went, flat pot. Yeah, so those kind of things, and it was really fun because in the community were engaged, and they laughed at the students because they said, you're not strong enough. And so the students came back so much more aware about how complex the issues were, how integrated the issues were, that it was not just one cook stove, and why they still had the fireplace that was like 1,000 years old, that's still with the 3 stones, because it was stronger, it was less maintenance, The improved cook stove wouldn't work. I don't want to get ethanol for why do you want the cook stove? I have to make 10 varieties of food, and that kind of cook stove that you designed in ASU is not going to work here. Those kind of things. So we use the resource, so adapt the resource mapping. So I teach That's right, and I've taught the participatory research class before. We did that with Native American tribal groups here. The communities were like blown away, and they had so much fun in New Mexico last semester. They're asking us to come in a few weeks' time, so I'll have to go back.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah. Any questions?
I have one more.
Please go ahead.
You talk a lot when you describe your research about you having fun, about
Yeah.
your participants having fun, and that's just like such a refreshing perspective to hear on research. And I wonder, is that something that you kind of walked in wanting to aspire to, or is it something that developed over time? That
So, I did say I was having fun, right?
You looked like you were having fun too.
Yes. I enjoy talking with people. I mean, I have been a chronically shy child. Nobody believes me.
Really?
My instinct is still to sit at the back of the room. So I have to work at it every day. Can you imagine how frightening it is to come to the United States and teach a bunch of undergrad from another country? Can you imagine?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's right. It's a little, right. It's a little bit tough.
tough.
Thanks, Kate.
Thank you.
So I have figured out that most people are shy. So as I grow older, it's my job that I'm not the important person here. Other people are more important. And it's my job as a teacher to do this. So I've had to, this is not easy for me. But I understand, and I'm also very much into the philosophy that against the idea of a research being extractive, that I've hated the idea of doing surveys, taking this 40-minute, so I've been involved in that in the past, and I've always hated that you force people to sit down for half an hour asking these technical questions. They have no clue saying what they're doing. I've been part of a Michigan State University, University of Michigan's long-term population research. So it didn't all start out fun. It's been also a very tough road in many, many ways because of the political climate in Arizona, because of a lot of logistical difficulties. But I've learned to understand that at the end of the day, if what you do does not benefit people who it's intended for, who am I doing it for? All right. So, but at the same time, I am very much invested in the idea that research is really important, and I do the best kind of research I do, and it has to be world class, and it has to be a team effort. I cannot be an expert in everything. I should not be an expert in. So it has to be a team effort. In a dissertation, of course, it's going to be a lonely pursuit. I understand that, but it's also very narrow, in that sense, right? And you do get help. So I kind of feel that. I tell students that the dissertation is not the end of the road, it's actually the beginning, and you really have to go think of what happens after that. And you have to have a sense of lightness, otherwise you'll be so tunnel visioned that you won't be able to make good analysis and even good conclusions out of it, because you are just so blinded by only your way of thinking. And that is contrary to what I think, 21st century researchers should be. So I have learned over time, trial and error, through walking by fire kind of thing, and burnt and singed. Sometimes I think I'm totally influenced. Learned. So it's still a learning process for me. I mean, right now, I'm tearing my hair out, literally, and figuratively, with the Department of Emergency, Military and Military Affairs, which I'm wrapping up this funding because of logistics. The research was the easy part. The logistics of trying to get their funding and wrapping up the report, because I have, is really what's problematic. So research right now is a grad student, it's actually easier. I know you don't think that, because it's totally under your control, right? When you go out in the field, and it's not always under your control. You have to work with teams, you have to work with other people, and therefore teamwork and how you relate with other people and how you work with other people becomes far more important, and in terms of how you produce knowledge. And I think what you have to do right now in your dissertation is really develop some very critical thinking skill, analytical skills, writing skills, reviewing skills, all of those kind of things, so that they become second nature to you as you make progress. And otherwise, if you're still struggling and not pushing yourself in all of those skills, you're still learning as you go out, and then the other kind of workload is added to you, and you'll feel overwhelmed. So take this time right now to master some skills. I tell grad students, I have no sympathy for you, because I was a grad student with two young kids, and both of us were trying to get a PhD. I had a 22-year-old month and a 4-year-old, and then two of us were trying to get a PhD. You know how miserable that can be? You have no money, and I had been on top of my job before I came to the United States. Like I was a consultant and earning good money, and I had a whole support system to take care of my kids. A village was raising my kids. All of a sudden, I came to the United States in the middle of nowhere in State College at Penn State, and it's like in the middle of winter, and it's like no money because you're not allowed to work as a F2 international student. You're not allowed to work. So it was miserable. So I have no sympathy for, in that sense, because I think it's tough love. Just you have to manage your time well. You have to have fun, but this is the time to get all the skills you can, and then have fun afterwards. But you have to work in teams, and you have to at least develop 2 or 3 critical skills, and your writing skill needs to be good. And I think what I would encourage all you all to do is also do presentation, articulation. So some of you, and writing for me is a torture. It's very hard to write. I've been writing since I was but it's very hard. But what I found out I can do is I can, verbalize it better. When I verbalize it better, then I can write. So practice talking and presenting, going to conferences, and if you're not presenting, when you're going to other conferences or any kind of lectures, just raise questions, even if it's a dumb one. So that way you learn to articulate your thoughts. Just use every opportunity you have to just interact, and that way what happens is it makes you think better, makes you take in perspective better. Don't just be a passive receptor of information. Just do that, give back, and I think that helps you in different ways. Builds your confidence, builds your articulation skills, makes you think about other perspective. It opens up different patterns in your head, synapses happening. You can think of different perspective. So that's the way I learn. I'm also very curious. I hope I'll be like that until I die. I'm eager to learn. That's why my pathway has never been very narrow. And people think that's odd. I don't care. I'm doing what I like. Yes,
you have so many diverse interests, and I'm sure when you work on a project, there are so many issues together. So how do you exactly narrow down to one research question? That is what I'm struggling with right now.
Yeah. So it takes a year sometimes to narrow it down to one research question, right? So I used to teach a research design class for many years. I've been asked to do that again. So one of the way I do it is I actually use a lot of Post-it notes. If you come into my office, you'll see on the walls. He's nodding his head. It sometimes helps you to visualize. So what I do is, if it's a particular topic, I say I'm interested in international development. I'm interested in climate. I'm interested in knowledge production. I'm interested in gender. Had time, I'm interested in all of these kind of things. If you look at my profile, it's all of these kind of things. So I was a consultant for the Dutch government to do a gender review of the work in Nepal, which I did with them. This was in the God, this was in 1988. You guys weren't even born. So that's, things haven't changed from that. So, but I refused to be an expert on gender just because I was a woman. You know, those kind of things. So those kind of philosophy also helps me guide that kind of thing. So it starts with my philosophy, right? And then I want to say if it's around climate, yeah, I'm interested in everything. Then I'm saying, what about climate? Is it climate mitigation, climate adaptation, climate impacts? And within that, then I say, okay, I'm interested in this. So I write it down, then I just take off the post-it notes and impact. And then within that, I start to narrow it down. I open it up, and then I narrow it down. I open it up, and then I narrow it down, because I want to put all the ideas up there. Because some of these ideas just floating in my head, it means I'm interested, but do I want to do a deep dive? I don't know. And sometimes you don't know until you do a deep dive. And they say, oh my God, I hate this. And it's okay, I make so many mistakes. And I think it's okay to make mistakes. Yeah, and then in some cases, I have had faculty in my team that I want to strangle, and others that I want to hug. Because we all go through the same problem. None of us have the answer to what your question is. Narrowing down the research question. I have spent 7 months with 3 faculty narrowing down a single research question on non-profit organizations. And in the end, we gave up. I hope he still likes me, but I just cut off ties with him. He's a senior faculty at ASU, and he was from Stanford, and he couldn't even help me. So I have had failures. And so the idea is, the research question is not, asking a good question is important, but the ultimate thing is you're trying to find a response to the research question, right? So a research question should be narrow enough that your methodologies that you identify can help you answer that question. Right, so Kate's question on images of future communication. So one of the things that we do as a grad student is that we make it so fanciful. And this is not the 4th grade English. So if I was Kate, I would say, if you're trying to explain to your grandmother what your research is, how would you explain it? And that helps you narrow it down. I always tell my students, if you can explain it to your grandmother so that she's not bored, then you know what your research is. Or your children, if you have children, and none of you have children. So just to help you. But it's a process, it'll take time, and the one thing you have to do when you're finding a research question is that you have to read. For one research question, at least a minimum of 20 highly related documents. Then that will give you the foundational basis on how to narrow it down. Otherwise, it's your instinct and your opinion, and those are real traps. Your opinions and your are real traps, unless it's informed by literature. So I always tell the students, oh yeah, I'm interested in urban sustainability. All right. Read about it, at least 15 documents, and then let's talk. And then the other tip that I give students on reading documents is that by the time you're on your 3rd document, you forget the first one, right? I mean, and then you have to go back and you're wasting time. So what I do is when they read the first document, I ask them to write 3 sentences about it. Always, just what the idea was and what the finding was, just like, can you do 3? And once you write it down, I tell them to write the author and not necessarily the title, but the author, right? And basically a annotated bibliography, and you move on. Because after the 4th document, it starts to become a blur. You forget. You have to go back and read. You're wasting time. So if you just look at the annotated bibliography, which you spent because everything is fresh in your head, then you don't have to go back and read the whole document again. And that will allow you to just read your 3 lines, because it's in your writing, right? That you'll remember it better. And that way, it'll force you to do synopsis very fast. And after the 5th or 6th time, it helps you. And then that's how you become the first layer of scholar, is that you did a meta-analysis of that particular topic just by reading. You don't even have, and that's an important form of method review. And that's how historians become scholars, right? And that the ability to extract the right kind of information is a skill that you need to learn over time. And it should not just be from peer-reviewed journal. I would go for, science writers. I would go with other non-American also. It's nice to get European perspective, Asian perspective, African, Latin American perspective, one or two, just to get that authors from a different perspective. So once you've crossed the 15 paper relate to the document, now we can talk. I feel that way. And then that will answer your question on how to narrow it down, because you would have said, okay, these people talked about that area, these people talked about that area. And so what you're trying to do as a researcher is always trying to find a hole, the knowledge gap that you can address, because you don't want to replicate everything else that everybody has done, right? So, but reading is the only way to become that kind of scholar that will allow you to find out what the gap is. All right? So we make you do that in the research courses and everything, and it becomes so much of a chore, it stripped the joy out of it. Do you think so? So I had a great teacher, a great faculty when I was a grad student. His name was Leif Jensen, and so actually, and he taught rural sociology. What he made us do was that he would make us ask questions. We had to write a small synopsis, but then we would, have to give like 3 or 4 nice questions from that, and then he would have this Hall of Fame kind of questionnaires. So all of the questionnaires, he would take 1 or 2 that he found was profound, and he'd stick it in on this, and he would publicize that, and he would feel so proud that your question was up there, that kind of thing. So when you are and over time, over the semester, everybody tried to figure out which one was. How many times did mine go up? Mine, oh my God, mine didn't go up even once, that kind of thing. So it was very nice way to, and he would try to make us do some profound question, how to do research questions and things like that. So I try to use that technique also when I teach.
Nalini, how do you take, how do you manage all that kind of information? So there's the article, the metadata that you have on the article. Some of that might end up going into a literature review. Some of it might stay for an annotated bibliography. How do you do you have a filing system? Or do you,
so what I do is so when I do it myself, I create a small annotated bibliography, but I also do a citation kind of a thing. So so I do 2 things. One is just if I want to use substantive amount of a single author that I like, I use information from annotated bibliography. Then what I do is I also create ideas, like, okay, Stiller is talking about CRISPR kind of the ethics around gene drive kind of thing. So I have, so what I do is a single idea that encapsulates an author's thinking. So I have that as a second column. So I have these 2 columns. One is the annotated bibliography, where I can use sections of that idea in a literature review, and then the other one is just, series of ideas of different that's just captured in a couple of phrases. So yeah. So I have these tools. Right now it's in my head. I don't use Excel sheets, but there are categories. That's how I categorize it.
You keep it all in your head?
I do.
Oh my God, okay.
I do. I've been doing it for so long, I can do that. But I started,
space up there.
Yeah, I have space there. When I was a grad student, I had these very primitive Excel sheets.
Cool. Okay. Well,
something like that. Something that I could map out. All right.
Thank you.
I hope that was useful.
This was wonderful.